OceanGate was warned of potential for catastrophic problems with Titanic mission.
If it wasn't an accident, it then has to be some degree of crime.
When I heard about the submarine people, the first thing I said was, what kind of stupid,
Yeah.
But I forget, like, I got empathy for the people still.
Joe Rogan didn't hold back when reacting to the OceanGate Titan submarine disaster. He questioned the logic behind the mission, the ignored warnings, and the terrifying way it all ended. From the flawed design to the chilling final moments, Rogan broke down everything that went wrong and why this tragedy should have never happened in the first place. Was this a case of extreme adventure gone too far or pure negligence? Let's get into the video and break down what really happened. The dive that changed everything. On the morning of June 18, 2023, 5 passengers boarded a small, experimental submersible in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean. Their destination, the wreckage of the RMS Titanic, resting more than 2 miles below the surface. What was supposed to be a daring, high-stakes dive into history quickly turned into a silent disaster. Within hours, the Titan submersible vanished without a trace, triggering one of the most intense and eerie search efforts in recent history. OceanGate Expeditions, the company behind the mission, had been offering trips to the Titanic for wealthy thrill seekers and history buffs. The idea was simple but bold: pay $250,000 per seat and descend in a carbon fiber capsule to one of the most iconic shipwrecks of all time. OceanGate's founder and CEO, Stockton Rush, wasn't just the brain behind the mission, he was also one of the 5 on board. Also inside the Titan were 4 other men: Hamish Harding, a British billionaire adventurer; Paul-Henri Nargeolet, a French maritime expert who had been to the Titanic wreck over 30 times, and Shahzada Dawood, a prominent Pakistani businessman, joined by his 19-year-old son, Suleiman. According to people close to him, Suleiman had reportedly been hesitant about joining the dive but ultimately agreed to accompany his father as a bonding experience for Father's Day weekend. At around 8 a.m., the Titan was launched from its mother ship, the Polar Prince. It wasn't much to look at: an elongated capsule, about the size of a minivan, with no seats, limited lighting, and a single small viewport. The interior was cramped, and passengers were required to sit on the floor with their legs crossed. There were no backup communication lines, no GPS while underwater, and only one button to operate the craft. The sub was controlled with a modified video game controller, something that later sparked massive scrutiny and public disbelief. Still, the dive went ahead as planned. The descent to the Titanic, located 12,500 feet below the ocean's surface, typically took around 2.5 hours. About 1 hour and 45 minutes into the dive, the Titan stopped communicating with the Polar Prince. It was radio silence. No pings, no updates, no emergency signals. At first, there was confusion. On board the Polar Prince, the support crew waited for signs of reconnection. A missing communication ping wasn't completely unusual. The system had dropped out on previous dives and reconnected later. But as minutes turned to hours, concern began to grow. What no one on the surface knew at the time was that the Titan had already imploded. Experts later determined that the sub likely suffered a catastrophic structural failure during its descent. The vessel's hull, made of carbon fiber and titanium, had been repeatedly criticized for being experimental and potentially unsafe at such depths. The pressure at the depth of the Titanic is around 6,000 pounds per square inch, enough to crush most materials instantly. At some point, the Titan likely collapsed inward in a split second, killing everyone on board instantly. The passengers would not have felt pain. According to engineers and physicists, the implosion would have occurred so fast, within milliseconds, that the human nervous system wouldn't even have time to register what was happening. One moment, they were descending toward the Titanic. The next, nothing remained but shattered debris. The eerie part? The Titan's disappearance wasn't detected in real time by the public or the media. Instead, the world only learned of the missing submersible several hours later, when OceanGate reported that they had lost contact. The U.S. Coast Guard was notified and began assembling a search and rescue team. Ships, planes, and deep-sea drones were scrambled. For 5 days, the story dominated headlines across the globe. There was a sense of haunting suspense. Could they still be alive? Was the sub intact, stuck on the ocean floor with limited oxygen and no way to communicate? The media played out every grim scenario. People speculated about dwindling air supply, the rising carbon dioxide levels, and the terror of being trapped in a dark capsule in the freezing Atlantic. Discovery on the ocean floor. OceanGate, for their part, released minimal information. Statements were vague. There was no admission of failure, no real-time updates from the crew aboard the Polar Prince. Families of the passengers were given no clear answers. It was only days later that a chilling detail emerged. U.S. Navy officials had detected what they believed to be an underwater implosion using classified acoustic technology. But that information was not immediately shared with the public. As the search continued, the grim reality began to settle in. If the Titan was intact and stuck somewhere, their oxygen supply would have been exhausted by the morning of June 22. That same day, debris from the sub was found about 1,600 feet from the Titanic's bow. The wreckage included the front and rear ends of the pressure chamber, clear evidence of a violent implosion. The search was called off. All 5 passengers were declared dead. The public reaction was a mix of shock, disbelief, and growing anger. Questions began flooding in about how a company was allowed to operate an uncertified submersible at such extreme depths. Stockton Rush had been open in interviews about rejecting traditional safety standards, claiming they slowed innovation. He once described certification processes as obstacles to progress. Former employees and industry experts had previously raised red flags. A former OceanGate employee had even filed a lawsuit in 2018, warning about safety concerns and alleging that the company was ignoring proper testing. Many now wondered how such warnings were overlooked, or worse, outright dismissed. But for now, the story had shifted from hope to mourning. Photos of the passengers began circulating online. Families issued statements of grief. Vigils were held around the world. The story of 5 men who descended to view history had itself become history, one of the most chilling modern-day maritime disasters, not because of a storm or a mechanical malfunction, but because of a decision to ignore caution in pursuit of something greater. Before the Titan ever touched the ocean floor, people were already uneasy about OceanGate's approach. Stockton Rush wasn't just a CEO, he was a self-styled innovator, determined to reshape the rules of deep-sea exploration. But his idea of innovation didn't involve following standard procedures. In fact, he actively bragged about avoiding them. Rush believed that regulation held back progress. He often criticized the submersible industry's obsession with safety certification, once stating that it prevented pioneers from doing cool stuff. In one of his more infamous interviews, he claimed that society needed a few casualties to push exploration forward. That comment wouldn't age well. OceanGate's submersible wasn't classed or certified by any regulatory body. Most deep-sea vessels must be inspected by third-party organizations that rigorously test structural integrity and safety systems. OceanGate skipped that step entirely, arguing that because no one else had done what they were doing, traditional rules didn't apply. They called the Titan experimental, a label that legally allowed them to bypass safety requirements, while simultaneously selling tickets to tourists. The most concerning choice was the material used for the hull, carbon fiber. Submersibles that dive beyond 3,000 meters are typically made entirely from titanium or steel. Carbon fiber is lighter, cheaper, and used in many high-performance industries, but not at extreme ocean depths. Under intense pressure, even small weaknesses in the material can cause microscopic delamination, which over time compromises the entire structure. Engineers and experts warned OceanGate about this. Some of them, like marine technology expert Rob Callum, even begged Rush to stop sending people down to the Titan. Former Director of Marine Operations, David Lockridge, had filed a lawsuit years earlier, claiming he was fired after raising serious safety concerns about the Titan's design. He said the viewport wasn't rated to survive the depth of the Titanic and that the company refused to do proper testing on the hull. But Rush dismissed the criticism. He believed industry veterans were just too conservative, too afraid of risk. He wanted to be seen as the Elon Musk of the deep sea, someone who would challenge old systems to chase something greater. Instead, he became a cautionary tale.